Facebook is profiting from white supremacist groups. Now, anybody who understands technology, we know that when you look on social media, how the hard right and how white supremacists, how they have been highly involved in using Facebook to spread their nonsense, to spread their message. Well, last week, the folks at Tech Transparency Project found ads monetizing search results from over 80 white supremacist groups. The organization discovered that Facebook searches for some groups with Ku Klux Klan in their name generated ads for black churches, highlighting minority institutions to a user searching for white supremacist content. In 2019, Facebook announced that it would ban white nationalist and white separatist content, adding to its existing ban on white supremacist content. Katie Paul, the director and spokesperson for the Tech Transparency Project, joined us from D.C. So, Katie, glad to have you here. So, essentially, y'all are saying that Facebook is profiting from white supremacy, from racism.
Yes, absolutely. Facebook's not just profiting from racism, but it's also creating potential dangerous situations for minority groups that unknowingly are having their ads surfaced in searches for groups like the KKK.
So how does that work? So if you type in KKK in Facebook, what's coming up?
So when we conducted this experiment, Facebook is trying to be like Google and trying to monetize every aspect of its service. And in doing so, it monetized searches, suggesting to advertisers that those searches would be, the ads would be contextually relevant to the searches. So when you search Honorable Sacred Knights of the Ku Klux Klan, the searches that were popping up were for Black churches. Now, of course, Facebook, pulls from data you have and tries to serve up ads it thinks that are relevant to you. So important context here is that we conducted this experiment on a militia styled account that we've been monitoring for years to mimic the far right. So there's no reason, even in terms of the historic data of that account, that content should have been showing up, which was deeply concerning.
Has Facebook had any response to your study?
When our study was published by the Washington Post, Facebook said that they immediately rectified the situation, and we have gone back and checked. Some of the searches have been demonetized, certainly not all of the searches in our study. But the fact that Facebook did move quickly to demonetize searches after this report is notable because anybody who's been watching the Facebook space for a while knows that the company is usually quite defiant and doesn't move quickly on anything unless they think there's going to be some sort of serious blowback. And that's clearly what we're seeing happen here. The bigger question is, with a system, one of the most sophisticated social media platforms in the world, why were these searches monetized in the first place? Facebook has its own list of dangerous individuals and organizations, and one of the images you're showing right here shows that their own systems recognize some of these searches as violating their terms of service, yet they were monetizing them anyway. And the question is why? And how much money are they making off of these businesses and churches and other organizations whose ads are being pushed in searches for this extremist content?
Questions from the panel. I'll first start with you, Larry.
Yeah, thank you. It's a very interesting study. My question is, first of all, we know that Facebook has been wink and nod, monetizing or in various ways, making money off of these groups that espouse, racist, homophobic, views, etc. But my question is, have you looked at other platforms to see what's Facebook doing? Does it mirror other platforms? And if it does, when you reached out to them or published your research, what was the feedback from those entities?
So we ran the exact same set of searches that we ran on Facebook on Google, because Google also monetizes searches. And while some of the searches on Google were monetized, the searches for hate groups, the rate of monetization was more than 3 times higher. Really, it didn't even come close. And so Facebook was far, far worse in this space. And it's just another example of where the company has worked to move fast and break things without any consideration for the consequences or potential safety. And I think it's important to note Facebook is aware that this search monetization issue is problematic because we raised it months ago with the New York Times when Facebook had monetized searches for the full live stream of the Buffalo shooters video. They actually ran the video in searches right alongside ads for things like a masterclass in live streaming. So the platform is aware that it has these problematic search monetization features, but it's not moving to address them unless directly called out in public spaces.
Nola.
Thank you so much for this particular project. As a social scientist, this is very exciting to me. So my question is a little broader. I tend to think about these things in misinformation and disinformation context, or even this particular issue. I have some very strong feelings about the First Amendment, and when it comes to the lack of protections regarding hate speech, it's there, but I don't think that the exception is strong enough. So I'm curious if some of the resistance that you receive from Facebook, is it kind of is it couched in its language around protection of First Amendment speech?
Well, that's a fantastic question. And absolutely, the First Amendment issues are something that Facebook has used to hide behind as a shield when pressed by Congress as to why they shouldn't be regulated. And, we're not just talking about issues of hate speech. Facebook also platforms terrorist groups that are designated. It allows the trafficking of a variety of endangered wildlife. None of these things can be protected by free speech, but they all have the commonality that the platform makes no effort to moderate them. And, as a private company, Facebook can certainly address free speech. We see that it does clamp down on certain groups. Famously, before the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, which was organized through a Facebook event, Facebook removed the event for a counter protest, but not the event for the Unite the Right until the day before. So there are plenty of times where they've made the decisions to remove content that they deemed violating. And this is just one other example of where they're really dropping the ball in the name of profit. And I think it's also important to note, Facebook has its own list of organizations that are banned, whether it's terrorist groups or white supremacist groups. And that's one of the lists we drew from for this research. And Facebook actually auto-generates business pages for some of these groups. So we identified a page for the Proud Boys that had been auto-generated by Facebook 2 months after the insurrection, despite the fact that that group has been banned on the platform since 2018.
Wow.
Robert.
This is absolutely great work. We've been here since, I think, 2015, both Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren calling for Facebook and other social media companies to be regulated as a public utility because of the amount of disinformation that we were seeing in the 2016 campaign cycle. Similarly, and for different reasons, we've seen many of the conservative side of the aisle claim that big tech is now censoring them and have called for additional regulations. What are the chances for there being actual legislative action taken to regulate some of these large tech companies as public utilities, so they will have to actually answer and address the First Amendment to stop many of these deleterious actions from taking place on their platforms?
Well, in terms of regulating them specifically as a public utility, I'm not sure about the chances of that. But I will say, having watched this space and been in Washington for a long time, this is probably one of the strongest bipartisan issues we've seen in many years, particularly when we get to issues like children and the effects of social media on children. This is a group that, regardless of party, people are interested in. And we are starting to see a lot of bipartisan interaction to push for regulation. We see Senator Blumenthal and Senator Blackburn really coordinating and working together following the release of the Facebook files, which essentially was a whistleblower proving that all of the things researchers like those at the Tech Transparency Project have been showing from the outside for years, Facebook has been well aware of and buried the effects rather than addressing address the problems in the name of profit. So I think that when you have the combination of outside research and the investigative research that our group and others do, as well as these whistleblower documents, there's a very strong chance that the company is going to be further regulated. And I think it's also important to note in the recent FTC filing against Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg himself was actually named as liable in that particular case. And Facebook just several years ago paid an extra multi-billion-dollar fine to the FCC to ensure that Mark Zuckerberg was not being held personally liable. So it's clear that regulators are starting to really kind of crack through the veneer and not buying the kind of PR window dressing they're getting from these tech companies anymore. I think Congress has wised up to the broader business model and the effects on society.
All right, then. Well, Katie, we certainly appreciate you joining us right here on Roland Martin Unfiltered. Thanks a lot.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right, then. And folks, let me remind y'all, we continue to have our own issues with Facebook. I told you a few weeks ago, I sent an email to several folks at Facebook trying to get an understanding as to why our page has been throttled. What I mean by that is many of you who follow this show on Facebook, you won't no longer get your live notifications when we go live. We used to have literally, if we ended the show, we might have anywhere from 60 to 70 or 80 or 100,000 views on Facebook. We would have a number of folks, and I'm talking about, I'm looking right now, looking at the numbers. I mean, I'm talking about the numbers are, they rarely ever exceed 250 views. So what has happened is, so what Facebook is doing is, I mean, and again, I've had two different people at Facebook email me to say, hey, we know there's a problem, something about numbers, but there's a glitch in our system. And I'm sitting there going, y'all keep telling me there's a glitch. Why in the hell the glitch ain't fixed? And so what the strategy is, so literally I got 1.3 million people who follow me on my Facebook page. So really what Facebook wants me to do, they want me to pay them to boost to the folk who already follow me. The people who already said, click my live notification, and that's for real. And they can't say, well, it's just sort of the content. No, that's not what it is. Because when I used to even go live just to do a live stream, well, we would hit 1,500, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000. There was a point when we would have, I think we ran a Jane Elliott, the town hall she and I did, panel at the University of Michigan. We had 10,000 folks on Facebook watching that thing live at 1 o'clock in the morning. That doesn't happen now. So there's no doubt in my mind that Facebook's algorithm is purposely throttling us down to force us to pay to reach the people who are already reached. And so that's why I told you all why we created the Black Star Network app. That's why we're doing our own thing, because we can't sit here and afford to have these tech platforms determine who gets to see our message and who doesn't.
All right, folks, back to our Roland Martin Unfiltered video in just one moment.
When we invest in ourselves, our glow, our vision, our vibe, we all shine. Together, we are black beyond measure.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Hold no punches. I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?